Hello folks, welcome back to the second video in my series on creating a new NES from an Opentendo board and parts salvage from my console, which I did unspeakable things to. Parts that I needed have arrived from Mauser. Shout out to FedEx, I ordered them on the 21st and they arrived here in Australia from Texas in the United States in 3 days. Little catch, I was going through the parts while preparing to record this video this morning and discovered I did not have the 13-pin resistor array that I needed, the one that was left in the board at the end of our previous video. I had to salvage the original 13-pin resistor array after all, and I've done that separately. I'll just splice in a little snippet on how I went about doing that. So to get this resistor array out, what I'm going to use is a little bit of dental floss, and I'm going to make 2 separate loops between the pins so that I've got an even amount of force on each side to pull on while I blast the rear side with my hot air gun. That's one strand through. And another strand. And another strand through. Now because I've well and truly damaged this board beyond giving a damn, I'm just going to blast my air gun full heat. I just need to get this thing out. We have a significant amount of ground plane around it as well, so that's going to make this a little extra challenging. But in my previous videos attempts, I munted the pads, so desolder gun heat transfer is not really going to work. Okay, wrapping around my fingers, getting some leverage against the expansion port. I knew I left that thing in for a reason. Hot air desoldering gun at 360 degrees. And that's come out relatively painlessly. Another thing I had to do was actually order 2 SRAM chips from Mauser as well, because I could only find one of the SRAM chips that I had ordered in my previous attempts at repairing the old board. I did actually go back to the eBay order details from 2023 to confirm that yes, I had indeed actually ordered and received 2 chips in that order. I just have no idea where the other one is, and I guarantee you I will find it as soon as I'm done here today. Now the memory chips that I did receive from Mauser are actually surface mount devices. They are SOIC24 package, so small outline integrated circuit. You may also see those reported as SOP24, so if you're looking for adapter boards, SOP24 and SOIC24 are identical. There we are, in all their glory. And from a local chap, I ordered some surface mount to dip adapter boards. So these will take SSOP packages on one side and SOIC packages on the other, and this is the side that we need. They just take standard header pins down their edges, so we'll need to solder those up at some point. Other parts that I ordered from Mauser were the large numbers of ceramic capacitors. I ended up ordering those because they basically added $2 to the price. Some of the ones I removed from the older board did end up with very short legs, so I figured I'll just take the pain away and get new ones that'll have long legs I can splay over. And the other parts that I needed to order from Mauser were the 74HC 368 chips. I didn't have any of those. Now, how to approach this? I think to get warmed up, so to speak, we might actually put the system board aside and let's get these soldered up. This could be an opportunity for me to break out the microscope. I shouldn't really need it for these, but it might make it a bit more interesting for you folks watching along at home. Okay, let's get into it. Okay, that's one side done. Now we'll do the remaining side. I'm trying a slightly different approach to solder up the second one. What I've done is grab some anti-static foam that I had in a box over there. I've torn off a big chunk of it so I could put the piece to solder into that, and off to the side there you can see I've taped it down with some cloth back tape to keep it in place. Hopefully that will be a bit easier to work with. Okay, and I've also put some fresh solder on the pads ready to take the memory chip. So let's get the memory chips on there. Okay, there's our chip under the microscope. Paying attention that our dot for pin 1 is in the correct spot, of course. Now I will tack opposite corner pins to keep this in place. The advantage of having just a little bit of solder on there at the moment is it should be enough. And once I get 2 pins in place, we can drag solder the rest. We will add some flux to those pins again, just to make our drag soldering job much easier. I said some flux, adds all the flux. We'll now clean the flux again so we can see it easier as I go to do a pin, a check on that soldering job. Okay, nothing appears to be moving yet. We have one memory chip ready to go. And there we go. There's our two memory chips on their adapters. I'll put these back in the anti-static box so we know where they are when we need them. Now we can turn our attention to the main board itself. Usually the smartest way to approach soldering up a fresh board is you want to go with the smallest, or more correctly, the lowest profile parts first. For our board here, that's basically going to be our resistors. There's a couple ferrite cores and a few diodes that we need to do. First of all, we'll get those all into their correct place on the board. From our previous video, you'll see I've got my resistor strip here, so I can pull off resistor 1, and now I just need to find it on the board. R1 drops right into place. R2 and 12. Thankfully R2 is near R1. And to no one's surprise, he drops in as though he was meant to be there. Now I do have to check to make sure that I get enough lead come through the other side of the board to solder onto. Given that these were salvage parts, I don't have any excess I can cut off. Okay, R12. R12 is up here. And that's right next to R13, so we'll take him out, we'll do him while we're at it. R3 and 4 are down the bottom. R5. R9, R7 and R8 are clustered here in the center towards the open source hardware logo. R7 and R9 in first. They are identical values. R8. Not too many left to go now. R10. Just 17, 18 and 19 to go. So that's all of our salvage discrete individual resistors in place. Now we've also got two ferrite cores and two diodes that we need to put in place. So FC1 goes down on the bottom right side of the board here. FC2 goes right next to it. Before we flip this over and start soldering things into place, we've got two Xanadiodes to go in because they are the same height profile as our resistors and ferrite cores. So we'll get those done. Paying attention for the blue band, which marks the cathode. Now D2. Now that all those components are in place, they do seem to have just enough tension to hold okay, but of course Murphy's Law means that as soon as I flip this over, stuff's going to want to fall out. So my thinking is I will use some of this masking tape to just hold them down. Again, if you got new parts, then you'd have plenty of extra length on the component leads that you could bend them out and prevent them from falling through. one big square for these last few components down in the corner. Okay, we've got our resistors taped down now, so we should be able to flip this over, solder all of those into place. I will pause here and come back when that's done. Okay, the resistors are all soldered in now, and I've also placed in the other components like the diode and resistor arrays, crystals, transistors, and little trimmer capacitor. Now, if we have any issues getting this to work, a couple things I will want to check is I'm not 100% certain on the orientation of the transistors and there's a 3-pin crystal, 4 megahertz one. The transistors had like a little tiny B on one end, and there's E, C, and B in the silk screen for the board. Hopefully that thinking was correct. So we've got our diode arrays, this 4 megahertz crystals. I think that crystal has the crystal itself as well as load capacitors, which is where the 3 pins come from for input and output. Now, observant folks may wonder, what about the photos that you took during the initial video? I seem to have deleted them. Similar to what I did for the resistors, I'm now going to tape down all the loose components so they don't fall out when I flip the board over. And before I forget, using the phone, I will show that if we look at where some of the resistors and diodes have been soldered, we can see that solder has actually come all the way through. This board uses through-hole plating, which is good. That's useful because, especially on components where we didn't quite have any pins sticking out on the other side, but the pin was in the hole, that shows us that we've got a solid connection there. Maybe a little too much solder, but I just want this thing to work. I'll actually show footage of me soldering up these bits. That's the flux applied. Let's get into the soldering. Okay, that's all of those components done. I think now all we have left to do is capacitors, connectors, and sockets. Oh, and also the video and power section. So next we'll do the capacitors that I salvaged from the board, the ones that have 1 and 2 values each. Let's start with the electrolytics. These actually have a good length on them still. So C23, we want to find the white side of the silk screen to indicate the negative side, which will be a black stripe down the side of the can of the electrolytic. And because I've got the room, I'm going to flip it over and splay those pins out now. C9, down the bottom here, again being sure to line up the striped side of the capacitor with the white part of the silk screen, and flip it over, bend the legs. And finally, C1 goes right next to C9. We'll quickly solder those in while we're here. That's the electrolytics done. Once again, I'll pause the video while I place the ceramic capacitors in their respective locations. Be back shortly. Right, all of the salvaged ceramic capacitors are in place and taped down. Time to solder them up. All right, and now all the ceramic capacitors are done. The close-up of what our board looks like at the moment. Making some good progress. Now we're going to do the 330 picofarad capacitors. There are 11 of those. I've brought up the Opentendo BOM webpage just so I can see what the component designators are. Starting with C5. Where is C5? That's all the 330 picofarad capacitors in place. Okay, that took about 40 minutes, but we've got all the sockets in place, all of our components. Get a nice close-up of the board there on the phone camera. It's still in need of a wash. There's a lot of flux on the back here. I will do that before I install the final piece, the RF modulator. Also, before I forget to mention it, with the board I purchased a null CIC chip, which takes the place of the lockout chip from the original. Similar to the adapter boards that we needed to do for our SRAM chips, that's a little breakout board. Sit there. So before it's forgotten, let's just quickly solder that up now. I do have to get going soon. I won't bother putting this one under the microscope. I'll just quickly knock it together on the bench. And there we are. One null CIC chip quickly soldered up. So the next steps with this bad boy is I will give it a good scrub down on the back with some isopropyl alcohol to get rid of a lot of the flux. Then I will probably have another look over it closely just to make sure I haven't missed anything. Rather do that now than later. Then we'll put the RF modulator in, put all of our chips in place, and power this on. So that should be exciting. Okay, folks, I have to get going for a gym personal training session, so I will pick this up again soon, but as far as you're concerned, it will be right now. I've given the board a wash and removed the flux. The final thing to do now is put the RF and power module in, and then seat all of our chips, connect it up to the TV and power it on, see what we get. Ooh. Exciting times. Without any further delay, let's get this RF and power module installed. Great big fat copper areas on this one. Will take a lot of heat. Possibly should have put a larger tip on my soldering iron. Remembering, of course, that you want the joint itself to actually melt the solder. You don't melt the solder and then stick it on the joint and hope for the best. Well, you can do that, but you will get substandard results, which might not fail immediately, which is the worst. Cold joints and all that. Okay, we'll need to clean flux off that again, but right now, I'm excited to just get all these chips in and power it on, see what we get. So let's install the chips. Start with our null CIC chip. Okay, that's ended up being a little too fat for the dip socket that I put in. I might have to desolder that. Gosh darn it. Okay, well, let's get the other chips in, shall we? Our CPU and sound chip. CPU's seated nicely. Let's do the PPU next. This is one of the clones I got from AliExpress, but as we would have seen in the first video, it was good enough to output some garbled graphics, so I think it's going to be okay. I really should have invested in an IC pin straightening tool. Okay, PPU is seated. Let's see, what's U3? A 139? Based on all the solder and junk on the pins for this one, it looks like the one that I salvaged from the original. I do have replacements if I need them. Now U8 and U7, they are the 7400 368s that I needed to purchase. I bought 4 of these in case I decide to do another system down the line. That way I'm already preloaded with more parts. Now U9 7400 04. That looks like another salvage one. Yep, but I've got these in my stock if I need any. That just leaves our RAM chips and our null CIC. The RAM chips are put back in their box. These are probably going to have the same problem as the null CIC now that I think of it. The header pins will go nicely through the holes on the circuit board, but maybe not so much in the dip sockets that I have soldered in. Yeah, they're too fat. Okay, well it's a good thing I repaired my desoldering gun because I'm going to need to desolder those. Really didn't want to have to do that. Oh well. What I might actually do, just to reduce how much I'm working on this board, is I might use the genuine sharp wide-bodied memory chip that I have, and we'll put that into the working RAM on U1, just so I can use the socket. And I'm just trying to think now, if I was to put a random NES chip somewhere, where would that be? So this is the problem with having a lot of little bags with individual components here and there, is that one that you don't need yet finds itself a new home somewhere. I'm going to stop recording and try a little harder to find this thing. Hopefully this won't take too long. Okay, well, I wish I'd tried just a little bit harder to search before I placed my parts order from Mauser, because most of that was the FedEx shipping costs and $20 Australian for the 2 SRAM chips, which it turns out I don't actually need. Most importantly, the label does actually match the contents. All right, let's have a look. Let's pop this one in. That's the second RAM chip seated. Oh, I'm really happy with that. I didn't want to have to desolder any more than necessary. But let's get the socket out for that CIC chip. What will probably come as a surprise to nobody, when you've actually declogged your vacuum desoldering gun, it tends to work way better. Who knew? Those pads look like they're all in good shape. Let's get this CIC chip in. Okay, one of the pins still has a little bit of solder, one of the holes still has a little bit of solder in it. I'll just put more solder on there and try and clear it fresh. Much better, I can see through it now. Success, we're in. Double check the orientation. Yes, we're good. Let's solder this bad boy up. The pins on that guy do show up very proud. Flux. Even when you think you don't need it, you need it. Or you will definitely benefit from its application. So just put flux on when soldering. Okay, we should be good now. Let's reassemble this just enough to test it out. Okay, plug the controller ports back in and the power connection. I think I've got the controllers around the right way. If not, that'll be a fairly easy thing to fix. Swap over. Okay folks, it's time for the big moment. Hopefully it's a good moment. 3, 2, 1. Okay, grey screen. I wonder if my edge connector could just use a bit of a clean. It's also starting to get to the point where I've had enough of this video. But hopefully we are very close. Yeah, there is a bit of stuff coming off on the cotton bud. Okay, let's try this again. And at least it's picking up that there's a PAL video signal coming out. A final round of hopefully low-hanging fruit. I mean, that video signal, even for grey, it looked like there were some artifacts there that probably need to go away. I figure we'll just give the cartridge and the cartridge slot a good working to clean that out, hopefully. Oh, come on, success, please. No. Okay, not sure where to take it from here, but I do know that that's enough for this video. I hope you folks have enjoyed the journey so far. Looks like there is going to be a third video as we try and get to the bottom of exactly what's going on here. Don't be too shocked if it ends up being a very short video where I cut in saying, hey, I worked it out and this is what I did. I'm bound to tinker with it a little bit on my own time, and that might get it to come good. Well, that actually didn't take very long at all. I gave the cartridge slot another going over with some isopropyl alcohol, and as you can see, we have graphics. They're looking a bit crappy, granted, but that is certainly an improvement. For all of this effort, we had the garbled graphics. Now we at least have consistent graphics. There's definitely some flickering and artifacting. I wonder if it's just this board needs a good clean, needs to be left for a couple days to really get dry. Hopefully it will just work perfectly. Yeah, stay tuned for an update down the line.